everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos The Brief. It's our weekly show about politics. I'm Marcus Smolitz with a nasty allergy, along with Carrie Eleveld with a house full of sick people. It is that kind of day.
A lot of COVID positive people in my household, and I'm like the last man standing, and I'm a little concerned about it, to be honest. But here I am.
Maybe you have a superpower. Maybe you have a superpower. So,
but we have a guest, it looks like.
Oh, we do have a guest. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Let's do.
Carrie, you've been writing about North Carolina, and North Carolina is both a it's been a disappointing story as of late. I know you've been writing about it.
It's been for 2 cycles, it's been ripe with possibility, and then just can't quite bring it home. Democrats. Yeah.
I mean, in 2020, we lost it by 1 point at the presidential level. In 2022, when Democrats made gains in several battleground states and basically won the election, North Carolina is one of the really sort of down spots. I think we lost the Senate race by a couple points, and we had a great candidate. There's a lot of hope there. Republicans were able to redraw the lines, and they had a near supermajority. And what happened to that, Carrie?
Yeah. Well, they had a near supermajority, and then there was a Democrat who ran. She was actually a veteran Democratic lawmaker who ran in a new district. I think it was a newly drawn district, and she won. And she ended up switching parties at the last second. After being, she gets sworn in, she switches parties to Republicans, gives them a supermajority, and she also ran as a pro-choice Democrat, someone who would protect a woman's right to choose. And so now Republicans ended up with a supermajority in both chambers. Within a month of her switching, they went and they forced through a 12-week abortion ban. There were 4 GOP lawmakers, her being one of them. There were 4 GOP lawmakers who had run on pledges to protect a woman's right to choose, and then went ahead and they just rammed it through. And of course, the Democratic governor, Roy Cooper, vetoed it, and then Republicans used their now supermajority to override that veto. And so in North Carolina, now you're going to have they're going to have a 12-week abortion ban. But it's the devil's in the details too. There's a lot of like murky language that makes it really worse than it sounds.
Sounds pretty bad without the murky language. I don't even think it's not a good story.
Here's the thing. So Biden lost North Carolina by a point in 2020, and really beyond what have become the perennial battleground states in the Trump era, which is, the upper Midwest, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's gonna not like being called upper Midwest, but anyways, the Rust Belt, Pennsylvania. You're not supposed to say that either. Michigan and Wisconsin. Okay. Then there's also Georgia and Arizona. We're all used to that handful of states. Florida's like barely a swing state anymore. I mean, it's like if
we won Florida, we won a lot of other stuff we didn't need to win anyway.
Yeah, right. Ohio is sort of out of reach. Texas, we keep wanting, but just can't get. We're not quite there. But North Carolina could legitimately be in play. And the reason, and not the reason, but one of the things that could help particularly is this issue of abortion and an abortion ban being enacted, because people did not have time to ruminate on what it would mean when Roe v. Wade was struck down by the Supreme Court last year before the midterms. And somewhere like North Carolina, they've had time to ruminate on it. There's a lot of suburban women who I think are not going to be super excited about that. And that is probably a good time for...
Yeah, Carrie, I was going to say, I think it's time to bring in our guest. And this is... This is solid, man. I'm excited that we have her on. Anderson Clayton, she's the chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, but not just any chair. She is 25 years old. You look like you're like head of the campus Democrats, and I'm sure you get that a lot. I mean, I just read a New York Times profile on you where
Wait. Let's just say that's a compliment where you're talking to two 50-year-olds here. You're actually just jealous of that. It's not like, oh,
so
you look like
jealous.
head of the campus Democrats. It's like, you look like head of the campus Democrats.
I want to look like the head of the campus Democrats.
Exactly.
But,
okay, sorry, go ahead.
But this has been, Anderson, I would love to hear how you got this job, how you even decided to run. I mean, this is an incredible story and it's exciting. And you have some incredible thoughts and ideas about how to turn North Carolina around from being this perennial late, red state into, actually starting to win some elections again, and maybe roll back these Republican gains that we've suffered in the state in the last few years. So tell us a little. First of all, hi. I haven't even given you a chance to say hello.
No, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you both for having me on, and also for caring, and not forgetting about us down here in the South. I really do appreciate it.
Are you kidding? Forget about North Carolina. Are you kidding? No way. No. We want it. We want North Carolina.
Yeah, we do. Absolutely. But I'm happy to be on and happy to share a little bit just about my background and how I got here. It is kind of random to be the 25-year-old state party chair and the youngest one in the country sometimes. I feel like I should be collecting a donation.
A lot, probably.
I feel like I should be collecting a donation for the state party every time someone says it, though, to be honest with y'all. I would have raised a lot more money by now, probably. But the excitement is really brewing just because I think, like, so many folks are really seeing a new energy and a new generation take over the state party, but also form what we want to see the Democratic Party become. I'm from rural North Carolina, so a little tiny town called Roxborough in Person County. And I give a big credit to where I come from for how I think about organizing and the way forward that our party needs to really take the direction of. But I got in this job through a lot of hard fight and organizing from young folks across our state who are ready to see a new direction. And that's exactly what this is right now. So I'm excited.
Wow. So, I mean, this is where Anderson and North Carolina sort of, fit right into the nexus of all these things we've been talking about. Yeah. Number one, battleground states. Number two, states that are gettable, that are within reach, especially if we can motivate young people and if we can win swingy suburban districts, right? If we can win over women. And then we also talk some about rural areas and how, it seems like Democratic policies actually play well in rural areas, but the brand just seems to be toxic in a lot of cases. And whether or not, and then we've also talked a lot about abortion and what kind of a new foothold that might give Democrats maybe a new opening for Democrats to talk to people who hadn't been willing to listen to us before. So you can take any one of those. Like, you could talk about young people, you could talk rural, you could talk, you can talk abortion. I mean, it's just like, it's like a panoply. Just go ahead and pick your angle, and we'd love to hear what you have to say about
that is your buffet, right? That's what you have to pick from. You have a lot of pieces to build a majority Democratic majority North Carolina. So how do you go about doing it with those pieces?
Well, I was going to say, actually, if I'm doing it right, I think I do it with all of them. And I think that the framing that I've really taken is that we don't have to walk, like, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We don't have to choose one or the other. And the real mentality across our state for the last decade has been, urbanization is going to save North Carolina. And the fun fact about our state is that North Carolina actually has the second highest rural population besides Texas when it comes to people, because we have really dense rural communities within them. And a large majority of those communities are specifically higher majority Black and brown areas that our state party just has never had, I feel like, the real ground game and infrastructure in.
Like Georgia.
Knock those doors. Yeah, just like Georgia. Oh my gosh. And the deep South in particular. But I tell the story a lot, how I got into this role is that I was the Person County Democratic Party chair. I came from a rural place, right, and never really found myself.
How many people in that county?
It's 40,000 people are in the county, and I've got 8,000 people within the city of Roxborough. And so small enough, but I'll be honest, some of my Midwestern states are like, Anderson, that ain't rural. What are you talking about, rural? Like, so
pretty rural to me.
It depends on what your definition of it is. And I joke with folks, I'm like, when you've seen one rural town, you've seen one rural town. So everywhere is a little bit different. We're not monolithic, unfortunately, for everyone's opinions. But Person County, when I took over being the party chair there, we had city council elections that the county party and the state party had never really been invested in or looked at. And 51% of the city of Roxborough was Black, right? And Person County may be an R+20 county, but it still had so much movability when it comes to what we could do on our city council. And so we actually ended up flipping the Roxborough City Council in 2021 from red to blue. We put 3 amazing Black Democrats, Shayna Outlaw, Peter Baker, and Cynthia Petty on our city council, and ended up really galvanizing a group of folks that had never found their votes to be important or worthwhile or elections really worth coming out to. And so for me, one of the main priorities of the state party this year is candidate recruitment. I want to put people in every seat. I want to give somebody to vote for, because we know that democracy is not democracy without choices. And a lot of our Democrats, especially in rural North Carolina, haven't had somebody else to vote for in a really long period of time. And so we want to make sure that we have good candidates running on policies that are local to the communities that they're in and that are actually affecting, their own backyard. People ask me all the time, Anderson, what direction do you want the party to go in? Left or right? Like which way you headed? And I'm going forward. Whichever way that looks like in your own backyard, I want us to go forward. And I think that looks differently across many different places in North Carolina. And so giving the flexibility of a message to reach Eastern North Carolina and our sand hills, but also Western North Carolina and our foothills, and being able to say, like, this message is something that we can give everyone, which is the fact that we believe in freedom and opportunity for everyone, regardless of what your zip code really looks like in North Carolina. So that is my message for my rural folks, and also hopefully some of my urban communities too. And then my younger people, I really do believe we've got to get back and active on college campuses. HBCU turnout was the lowest it'd been since 2010 in North Carolina last cycle. And we
had a great Black Senate candidate.
When we did, right? But we didn't have the outreach on those campuses, I feel like, that we needed to have had early on to help educate folks. Like, when you look at A&T, one of our large historic Black colleges right in North Carolina, they are gerrymandered, right? Our state is racially gerrymandered. And so half of their campus, 5,000 students sit on one side in one district and 5,000 students sit on another side in another district. And so they vote at 2 separate polling locations, right, on election day. And that's confusing. And so having somebody on that campus year round to educate students about what that's like and how you register to vote and actively doing that is something our party is going to be very focused on this year.
Yeah, to be clear.
Can I just say, it's making me really hopeful listening to you, because Anderson's got a big picture vision, and she's talking about granular issues at the same time, right? So, when the big picture is we can do it if we get these demographics out. Also, there's this voting place in this one on this one campus, and half people have to vote over here, and half that's from big picture to granular. That's the type of thing that I think can actually move a vision into a reality. So anyway, go ahead, Marcos. Go ahead.
That's an intentional confusion, right? Republicans on purpose are making it harder for people to vote. And that just doesn't mean just restricting their ability to vote and get registered, but also making it so confusing that they don't even know where to turn out and cast their ballot. This is on purpose. It's intentional. And this is what we're facing as a movement, because it's a Republican Party that knows they cannot win on a broad electorate. They know they're the minority party.
Yeah.
Anderson, not everybody, a lot of people, a lot of liberals like to rag on the Democratic Party, like, oh, the party doesn't do this and the party doesn't do that. And in reality, there's limits to what the party could actually do, right? The candidates matter more. Tell us, what can a party do? What is within your ability to influence?
Yeah, I think about it, and the party can. One of the places that I think the party has not played a big role in, and we did in 2008, right, is recruiting more people to join our party. Folks look at me all the time and they're like, Anderson, why are so many people registered unaffiliated? And I'm like, because who's registering them to vote right now, right? Nonpartisan organizations that are actively on college campuses. When I was registered to vote for the first time, I was registered by the Watauga County Democratic Party at Appalachian State University. They had people there during welcome weekend and at the midnight pancake breakfast that Appalachian State did for their students, right? Like, they were there with clipboards and they said, are you registered to vote at your current address? And we can get you registered at your dorm. We can help you do that right here. And really going to people and meeting them where they are, I think, is the role and the responsibility of the party. The 2 jobs that I would say that we have to do this year that we have not done in the past is really to protect our incumbents and get out our base. President Biden lost North Carolina by 100,000 votes in 2020. Sherry Beasley lost our state by 134,000 votes in 2022. Sherry Beasley won, though, 5 House districts that we lost. And when I was hearing y'all earlier talk about the realities of abortion rights right now in North Carolina and the restricting of that, if the Democratic Party, if we had done our job with getting out 500 more people in some of these House districts last cycle, we also would still have Governor Cooper's veto power and proof and majority in that sense. And so, or we wouldn't be in a super minority right now. We would still have the power to uphold that veto. And so for me, I think our state has really won and lost on the margins. And this year I am chasing after the margins and every cranny and nook and corner that they might be in North Carolina right now, to be honest with y'all. So those are definitely the things that I'm looking at.
Let me just follow up on that and repeat. What you're saying is that Sherry Beasley, because you know the specifics so much better than we do. Sherry Beasley actually won 5 districts that ended up that Republicans ended up winning the actual seat. Right? Is that true?
Yeah. So thinking about like a good example of it, right? The first ever Hispanic state House of Representatives member, Ricky Hurtado, lost his seat last cycle, and he lost that seat by 500 votes. Like, you have Brian Farkas out in Pitt County in Eastern North Carolina that also lost his seat by around 600 votes. Like, a lot of these things were places that the party should have been active in. Forsyth County, to me, like Carla Catalan Day lost a House seat by 2,000 votes there. And I'm like, those are doors that the party should have been knocking, and we should have had the infrastructure there to do that, and we didn't.
Right.
I
Okay.
now suddenly understand how you won your position, because that is an incredibly powerful argument to make against a.
Well, I went down ballot too with it, Marcos, right? Like you had Judge Denise Hartsfield in Forsyth County lost her race by less than 70 votes. Kimberly Best in Mecklenburg County lost her judgeship by 77 votes. Like, those are places where it's just like, no, actually knocking a door and getting someone out to vote made the difference. And there are so many people in our party right now that I feel like have this disgruntled feeling towards like how much field actually cost and the opportunity and the ROI on it. But I'm like, no, those were actual investments that we should have made in that in order to be able to get back votes and actually have those seats.
Let's zero in on Mecklenburg County for a second. Isn't that where Tricia Cotham, is that right? Yes, hails from? Okay, so Tricia Cotham is the previously Democratic legislator that I talked about at the open. I gave sort of a blind lead on, but that's her name. Okay. And she was a Democratic veteran lawmaker who just recently switched to Republican. She also ran on a pro-choice, protect a woman's right to reproductive freedom. And then went ahead and turncoat, changed parties, and then actually voted for that 12-week abortion ban. But you're saying that, so she won as a Democratic lawmaker, that she represents Mecklenburg County. Am I right? I just want to make sure I'm right.
Yeah, okay. No, Mid Hill, good on HD 112. Voted 60% for Joe Biden in 2020.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so she won that, but the judge lost it.
Well, yeah, 2 different parts of Charlotte, but yes, in that sense, like in 2 different areas, okay. I mean, but yes, absolutely.
Gotcha.
Kimberly Best lost that seat. And Representative Cotham, I think, the name recognition is obviously there in Mecklenburg County for her. That was definitely one of the areas that I feel like she was strongest in, is just the fact that like her mom is also on the Board of County Commissioners in Mecklenburg County. So that's another interesting caveat here. As a Democrat.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so lots of things awkward. There, to be honest. It is a little bit awkward. Yeah.
Well, tell me what's going to happen in that county, which is mostly suburban Charlotte. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what's gonna happen in that county? Do you think, like, what are your opportunities given what just happened? Are those voters going to feel betrayed? Do you feel like there's maybe some Southern women who had trouble even imagining themselves ever voting for a Democrat, who might like actually think about that now? I mean, I don't know, like what are your avenues there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that she made it really hard for people to trust a process, right? And that's something that I think about, if I was just her, one of the things that would make me not be able to sleep at night, I think, is the fact that I've made people question whether or not democracy and whether or not your vote actually counts, right? And so for me, one of the things that the party is really trying to do is going in and making sure that we're canvassing her community, her neighborhood, in the sense of like her backyard, right? And letting folks know that's not what the Democratic Party is going to do in 2024. And we actually do plan to vet candidates really strongly, but we know that Republicans have been putting people in our primaries for a long time, right? That's not new. If you're in a blue state right now or in a blue area in a state, you know that Republicans know that's the only way to win elections sometimes. And I keep going back to that, or having to revert back to it. I think Marcos had mentioned it earlier, of just like the concept of that Republicans can't win elections unless they are cheating in some capacities, right? And that to me is exactly what this was. It was cheating voters. And I do believe that like voters are going to come back and really make that an election that is on Tricia Cotham, right? It's a repeal and a recall on her, even though we don't actually have recall elections in North Carolina, which I also feel like everyone got a civics lesson when Tricia Cotham did this in our state, because so many people asked, can we recall her? Like, can we do this? And unfortunately, thanks to our Republican state legislature, you cannot do that in North Carolina. So we're stuck with her right now, but we do plan to vote her out in 2024.
The broader national trends are that college-educated suburban white women, and maybe there's hints at white suburban college-educated men, are trending in our direction, but the rural areas are not. That the brand is so toxic. How does that match up to what you're seeing in North Carolina?
I think it's the same thing. I tell folks like the Democratic brand is not good in Person County or in any place that I've been in across the rural parts of our state. And I think that's because we haven't had a message there for a really long time. When I look at the fact that we don't have, 100 strong county party operations in every single county in North Carolina. And it's like we've let people tell the story for us, right? The Fox News rabbit hole and the silos that rural folks have been forced into, in my opinion, has really made it so that you only get one form of information right now. And if you don't have Democrats in that county that's willing to come out and say, no, I'm a Democrat and here's what I stand for and here's why I'm standing for it. And really those folks are oftentimes like your nonprofit leaders. They're your school teachers. They're the people in your county that actually really make your county run and care about the people that are the most in need. And so when I've challenged my party this year to really become the party of service, like this is a place that I feel like we can fill the gap, because the pandemic brought it out more than ever that rural communities and people in these areas are not surviving or not thriving. They're surviving, right? They're just living, and they're not really able to ever reach that economic freedom or that opportunity, I think, to really see themselves in any other place. And that's something that the Democratic Party right now is fighting really hard to get folks to say, like, we believe in your future in a rural place right now. The Affordable Connectivity Program, the American Rescue Plan Act, and the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the things that these pieces of legislation are saying for the first time in 40 years, right, is the fact that the federal administration believes that rural America deserves to have a future 50 years from now.
But is that message getting through, though? Because we've seen it before where money gets spent, Democrats don't get the credit for it, or they don't know how to even claim credit for it.
Yeah, I mean, well, like without an operation in these places, no, right? Yeah. And that's where I'm like, the infrastructure I'm trying to build is all based around that. It's based around like, are we knocking doors, letting people in these rural areas know that like Joe Biden is trying to get has given $35 a month insulin, right? Like I had someone that came to the Democratic Party office the other day that was calling it. He said, my wife is still paying $500 a month for insulin. How do I get Joe Biden's $35 a month insulin? Ooh, yeah. And I said, have you talked to your doctor about switching the drug company that you're using to get your insulin through? Because Eli Lilly is who you have to use right now for that, or at least like some of the questions that you have to ask folks to take them through that process. That's where a Democratic Party, in my opinion, is supposed to be playing in action right now. And we haven't been over the last 6 years or last decade about like what Democrats at the federal level are doing. But it's hard to translate down, Marcus. You're not wrong. Like genuinely, it's not easy.
Yeah.
Carrie, we heard that. Remember we talked to the organizer, Democratic Party organizer in Arizona, in Navajo Nation, and she said that was exactly her strategy. It was turning the Democratic Party into a service organization again. So it's not just somebody that comes around asking for their vote every couple of years or every 4 years. It's actually an organization that is present and active as a civic institution providing those kind of services. So I'm hearing that this is your vision.
Yeah, I think it's a vision for a lot of folks that maybe see a different direction of our party going forward and are kind of like, how do we enable people to see that government's working for them? Because so many people, and especially in rural North Carolina right now and rural America, just don't, right? And even in urban communities, I think it's the same thing where folks just feel so detached from what's happening. How do we let people know that like government is supposed to be a constituency services organization, basically? Like, we're here to connect you with the needs that you have and get you help. Like, that is the main thing that we do.
Okay. So there's two things too that I wanted to just pound home, which is number one, you talked about economic freedom, and as a big picture message, it's great. The freedom to thrive, right? You also talk about thriving, and freedom is just such a good word right now because Republicans nationally and also locally and at the state level are tramping on freedom, just trampling freedoms left and right. So it's a great, freedom is a great word. The second thing, and you're going to have to excuse me because I'm hoping I can come up with
freedom is literally the Republicans ceding the freedom narrative to the Democrats. It's definitely one of like Kerry's like big storylines this year because it's just so implausible and such a gift.
Yeah, it's such a gift. Here's the other thing you said. Biden's $35 insulin. Like, I just love that as a messaging point. That's Biden's $35 insulin. If we can get people to talk about that as Biden's $35 insulin, that is genius. And if we start talking about it like that, I'm going to come back and say, you know who said it first on our podcast is Anderson Clayton.
Well, Kerry, I got to give it credit to the man that came to my door the other day and told me that, because I said, oh, he's calling it Biden's $35 a month insulin. I like that.
I like that. You can't argue with voters. You can't argue with voters. They're the best messengers. Okay, so here's my next question, which is an actual question and not just me blathering on. What's your which state is your North Star? Like, if you look at a state that's done kind of what you're hoping to do, is it somewhere, I think of like Georgia, which is next door, but then I also think of like Ben Wickler in Wisconsin.
He's the state party chair of
state party chair.
Familiar, trust me.
No.
Trust me.
Oh, not for you, for everybody else.
We didn't. Oh. That's for our listeners' sake, in case they don't know.
I'm a big fan of Ben Wickler's. My goodness.
No, our audience is very, very, very smart about politics, but that might be even a little too inside baseball for a lot of them.
Naturally, it's so funny. Yeah, state party chair of Wisconsin.
Yeah. So is there a model out there, or do you kind of feel like, no, we've got our own, specific situation in North Carolina, and this is what we're doing?
Well, I feel the same way about how I look at states as I said about the towns thing. You've seen one rural town, you've seen one rural town, you've seen one state, you've seen one state, because we are all so different. But I love the organizing, like, kind of apparatus that actually Chair Barnes in Michigan has built around her right now. Chair Barnes has 14 organizers that have been with her since 2017. And I think, like, they are, as she defines them, Swiss Army knives. They can do anything on a campaign that you would want them to. And I think that when we're looking at how do we build out sustainable year-round infrastructure, it's really resourcing our volunteer base, right, with the tools and the trainings that they need to do the organizing in their own communities. And for me, that is like creating a structure that has people like that can kind of answer any question on a campaign, can help someone that's local, like getting started with a race or whatnot too, and can kind of answer all those things. Wisconsin's like a dream, I'll be honest with you. Like, Chair Wickler has made that entire operation up there like bonanza, I feel like, and it's the North Star for anybody, I'm sure, that's looking at state party land. But I think realistically where I'd like to get within the next 2 years and next 4 years of North Carolina is really building up what Michigan has, and then hopefully my 8 years can look more like Wisconsin can in that sense.
Well, I mean, Michigan, we're winning elections by 8 to 10 points, and in Wisconsin, we're winning them by a couple. So actually, Michigan would be kind of everybody's dream.
Michigan ain't too shabby.
Ben Wickler also, though, like, he's got a lot of staff on the ground up there. So I'm like, when it comes to what I'd actually like to be able to produce financially at some point in time, it would be that, because I think
that is a perfect segue to my next question, which will also give you an opportunity to tell people where to fund, where they can go to donate to your party in North Carolina. But what do you need? What kind of resources? And it might just not be financial. I mean, maybe it's well, it all comes back to financing, but like, what do you need in order to get to where you want to go?
Yeah, that's the funniest thing. The phrase I've used throughout the last 3 months, because I've only been in this job 3 months, right? I said, man, it costs a lot of money to be creative in state party land, y'all. Unfortunately, as a county party chair, you could do a lot with a little. You know, I won 3 city council races with about $2,500 in a bank account, and that was something. And you could do a lot with it, but it's a bit different in this sense. I think we need money to enable like good training programs. I come from the campaigns of like Iowa when Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren had their operations there. I worked for both of them when I was an Iowa caucus organizer. And Elizabeth Warren just had this like way of having organizers that were so trained. You could ask them anything about her policies, about how she thought about something, and these organizers knew it, right? And they were so well versed on her. And I think that it made them such good spokespeople for her at a door, right? Because they could answer the questions that people had about her. It wasn't like, oh, I need to go check with the candidate on this and see where their policy is or see like what this kind of looks like. And while organizing, I think across North Carolina is going to be different than that. I want volunteers across our state that are that well trained to go out and talk about our governor candidate, our lieutenant governor candidate, and everything else down ballot in between, because I think that the training apparatus that we need is there. So right now we don't have that, though. We are understaffed in the state party. And so if anyone listening to this is a good trainer on voter registration or anything in the sense of phone banks and stuff like that, I would love to have any sort of help in the meantime, because we are building up a good operation here and are getting it going. But I think that's what really a state party could use right now.
Yeah, we should, Carrie, we should talk to our activism department and see about get North Carolina into our rotation,
into the mix.
Yeah.
Yeah. You might have some influence there, Marcos.
Do I admit how little influence I have? Yeah. No, absolutely. No, I'm excited. So, I know we're almost out of time. So, Anderson, can you tell us what's at stake in North Carolina? There's nothing happening this year that I don't think anymore. So, what's at stake in 2022?
Municipal races are happening this year. What I will say, and Battleground 2024 starts with Battleground 2023 for us, because there are city council seats and mayor seats in places in some of these areas that we should have that should be Democrats. It should not be Republicans sitting in those offices anymore. So we are prioritizing and really trying to pick off, honestly, where are municipalities that could be Democratic strongholds and build that back up. We are trying to recruit candidates to run for every state house and Senate race this year, because we left 44 seats uncontested in the state house and state Senate in 2022, which is the most that we've ever left uncontested in state history. And so finding a candidate to run in every single one of those races. And I'm very lucky. My good old governor has agreed to pay the filing fee for anybody that wants to do that. And when you look at what's on the line in that capacity is because, we really are looking at, I just think human rights. And I put that in front of people as though, we've seen a regression in voting rights in the last 3 weeks. We've seen a regression in women's rights. We've seen a regression in bodily autonomy, LGBTQ rights. Like, the actual persecution of our citizens is what we're seeing right now in North Carolina. And for me, when folks look at me and they say, what gives you this resolve to keep fighting for a state that's probably made you so mad over the last 6 years, it is the fact that no one deserves to cede ground anywhere to a party that has fully endorsed white supremacy and oppression of Black and brown people across our state, and also just in general, our community as a whole. And I think that North Carolina just deserves better. And so I think that not only are your rights on the line, but also your right to public schools. North Carolina Republicans right now are trying to gut public education. They're also trying to limit the ability to restrict, honestly, guns in our communities. The pistol permit repeal vote was the first one that actually Tricia Cotham walked on. And pistol permit was something that you had to have, that you had to get through your county sheriff whenever you applied basically to own a pistol. And they took that away, and it actually ended up putting more guns into rural communities this year. And so when we're looking at public safety and really prioritizing our people and our children, I think that you're voting Democrat no matter what in 2024 and in 2023.
All right. So I'm going to take a point of personal privilege, because I know Marcos wants to wrap this up, but one last thing. Do you have anything that you think has motivated you, motivated people to get in touch with you and say, how can I volunteer? Have you seen a moment where there was an uptick in, I want to volunteer for the state organization, or I want to get involved, or I want to run? I mean, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, talking about being from a rural place. And I had someone message me the other day and they said, Anderson, the great thing is you ran on it, but you haven't stopped running on it either. Like, you still talk about it, you still bring up these places. And I tell people that, like, even if you're in the reddest of rural, to me, like, you are still worth fighting for. Your vote is still worth fighting for. People are still worth talking to, because I came from a place that looked like that. And I know there are other people that look like me and feel the way that I do, that are part of the LGBTQ community, that are growing up in these places that didn't get a choice. They didn't choose to grow up in a rural area, but they're there, and we have to be reaching out to them. And I have found so much power and energy from young people that are from these places that are like, thank God someone sees me at the end of this. And they're fighting for someone that's just like me, still in these communities. And so that's why I'm never giving up that rural message. It will never be something that folks hear me stop talking about, because I'm like, opportunity everywhere. It's not just for like our cities and our urban communities, but I want them to have it too. And I know that all of the things that I'm talking about also impact them as well. Like, broadband access is not just a rural issue, it's an urban one as well. Digital redlining has happened for when you're leaving out poor areas, right? And broadband companies have been able to do that for years now. And it's the same thing with rural areas. And I hate the phrase of the rural urban divide, to be honest with y'all. I really do feel like we've got to get over that, because what impacts one impacts the other. So that's really been my big message that I think's impacted people a lot.
All right. So what's the website?
In www.ncdp.org. Please find out more information about us, how to get involved, and definitely donate, y'all. Thank you for the opportunity to say that. I appreciate it.
Anderson Clayton, amazing chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And Carrie, it came so many times. It came up, because I had the question, like, how'd you get elected at age 25? But she answered that question consistently throughout the interview, right? Nobody, doing door to door in this county, that county, losing by dozens of votes, a couple hundred votes. It really, that level of missed opportunity hurts, and it actually has consequences. I could totally see, given where North Carolina is today, that having that message with the committee members of the state party and saying the previous regime didn't do what we needed to do, not just to build a party. They didn't even try to sustain the party that we had. And it has cost Democrats and the people of North Carolina dearly. So it is a
let's remember, she said there were 44 seats that were left uncontested by Democrats in I think the state house and state Senate. So I mean, that 44 seats left uncontested. I mean, that's and people have to remember too, for every one of those seats left uncontested, even if you end up losing, running someone there is worthwhile, because it all goes to the top of the ticket too. You know what I mean? Like, it's worthwhile on a local level. You want to get people out to vote. You might actually win those seats, but also it's like, it's gonna lift all boats to have someone contesting every one of those seats. You don't want to just give it away to Republicans for free.
Yeah, it's about cutting the margins, and we've talked about this before, and we'll keep talking about it. We're not going to win those rural areas, but that's not the game. Right now, we're losing them 80-20, 85-15. If we made them 75-25, there's a lot of people that live in those rural areas, and we've seen it. And if you've been tracking election results, you see it, right? Maybe cities will come in and Democrats are up by 30 points, and then rurals come in and they lose. There's a lot of people. People look at the cities because a lot of people live in a small, piece of land, but there's a lot of, cow country where people live, but it's just massive land-wise. And so you have her county's 40,000, like multiply that by, I don't know, North Carolina has a lot of counties. It's one of those states that is. It matters. So by cutting those margins by 10%, that could have been the difference between us winning, Chris Beasley winning the Senate seat, which would have been
right.
She was an amazing, amazing candidate, an amazing person. She would have been a credit to the Senate.
What would have been really interesting too was I just wonder, and I don't know the answer to this, and maybe we can look it up and come back next week. But Anderson said that that more of the state there is rural than it is urban, right? And what Democrats have been counting on, kind of like, this is my loose understanding, is that hopefully North Carolina, the weight of like Charlotte and the Research Triangle would become heavy enough that the urban, the urban density would sort of overcome the rural areas, and then it would become Democratic, right? And that has kind of happened in Georgia, although I don't know what the actual balance is
Yeah, not
between
quite.
rural Georgia. Yeah.
There's a really big black rural population that historically never turned out to vote,
Mhm.
and they turned out to vote in large part because Stacey Abrams
Well, so,
organized there,
yeah, it sounds like it was the organization, because it's
and
not
so
like,
it
because you
turned
had
out
Sherry
people.
Beasley, who was a black, in North Carolina running for Senate. She was a, highly qualified black candidate. And it sounds like, they didn't get the turnout there that they would
Yeah,
hope for among
yeah, and a lot of that strategy
people of
because
color.
I know the strategy very well. It's um, the emerging Democratic majority is based on this creative class, right? Creative people, professionals, not blue collar workers. It's people who are in, you know, creative,
Right.
writers and designers and scientists, people who create stuff, creative class.
Right.
Um, it really assumed that Democrats would not lose more in the rural areas. So
Ah,
it was maybe rural areas
interesting.
are 70-30. Yeah, you get the increased turnout in the research triangle, in the cities themselves, and
Sure.
maybe make some inroads into the suburbs. But that doesn't work if that 30% you used to get in the rural areas is now 15%.
And that's exactly probably what happened in Georgia,
That's what
was
Trump
that
did. Yeah.
Atlanta became the sort of dominant city in the sprawling suburbs, that could anchor Democrats. But then, because of Stacey Abrams organizing and other
And
organizers
Raphael
who we've
Warnock,
talked
yeah,
to,
yeah,
yeah, in right, then they didn't, in the rural areas, they didn't lose that 30-70 that you're talking about, 30% of Democrats coming out to 70% of Republicans. They didn't go up to, like, 10 to 90 or something like
yeah.
that.
Which it's
And in
happened
fact,
in a lot of
turned
places.
out,
Yeah.
yeah, right. And in fact, turned out pretty heavily in both of the last two cycles, in order to make sure that both John Ossoff and
Raphael Warnock.
Raphael Warnock ended up, are representing that state in the U.S. Senate. So
Yeah.
anyway, Anderson Clayton, man, that was a barn burner of an interview. I mean, and not because of us, because of her.
She's
And I
amazing.
just want to say one more time, ncdp.org. That's North Carolina Democratic Party.org, right? ncdp.org. And as she said, you need a lot of money to be creative when you're at the state level.
It's like, holy crap, I'm not in I'm not in my small town anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway,
Ben Winkler in Wisconsin has been able to do that in Michigan too. These are state party chairs that have completely turned around moribund state organizations. Big part of that was getting people to believe in them and their state and their party. And I think that's exactly what Anderson is starting to do. She's only had the job 3 months, she said. So she's brand new, but I see so much potential for her to be the next superstar Democratic Party chair in a critically important battleground state. And there's no Senate race in North Carolina next year, but the battle for the Senate is real. We may not hold the Senate after next year. The map is absolutely terrible. I'm hopeful that we can. So we need to make North Carolina competitive at the Senate level. We need more competitive Senate states. So she's going to be critically
yes,
important, not just next year, not just this year in her
yeah,
municipal races. That most of our audience probably is not just they're not going to bring themselves to care too much about that. But what matters is that will eliminate a lot of potential Republican candidates for 2022. It will create new Democratic candidates for 2022, and it will build momentum and organizing strength for
wait,
Joe Biden.
2024.
24, yeah.
Yeah,
For Joe
sorry.
Biden,
I was like, wait a second.
it would be great to get North Carolina in Joe Biden's column just
Yeah,
for breathing room. Roy Cooper, the governor, Democratic governor, is up for re-election. There's going to be state legislative seats up for re-election.
I think he's
Oh,
term limited out.
Oh, is he? Okay,
I'm
even
pretty
worse then.
sure. Yeah,
Even
because
worse
he
then.
won
Then
in
it's going to be an open seat.
2016. So but this is really important. I mean, this is why yes, we want to have a big success in North Carolina for 2024 to build on for future Senate races. But not only is that one of the only states that Democrats might have a chance to flip in 2024 in the presidential, but also I'm not sure who's running for Cooper's seat, but I'm pretty sure that the Republican candidate who's announced there is like a forced birther like extremist. Okay, so who's trying to walk back, wanting a total abortion ban, to saying he'll go for a 6-week, like that, like as if that's not a total abortion ban.
Reasonable. What a compromise!
Yeah, he's gonna go moderate. He's gonna moderate to 6 weeks. So anyway, but like you see the difference here between, getting a having a Democratic successor to Roy Cooper and picking up flipping 1 or 2 seats back to the Democratic column. You get rid of that supermajority that they've been able to use to jam through. I mean, we're never going to make up all the gains in North Carolina in like one cycle. But that would be a huge way for Anderson to start pushing that forward, and then hopefully to pick up a Senate seat, and then you get gaining on momentum. So anyway,
Harry, thank you so much for getting her on the show. That was an amazing catch, and I'm going to be excited to follow her career and lend her a hand whenever we can. She's going to be I think she's a future superstar for our party. Thanks for being such a great co-host. Thanks to Walter for producing the show. Thanks to Paul for helping behind the scenes. Thanks to everybody who reads, watches, listens, the podcast and Daily Kos. You guys are amazing. I love you all. It's great to have you guys as fellow travelers in this battle for our democracy. It's never ending, unfortunately. And there's a lot of work to do, and I'm excited to be doing that work with you guys. Thank you so much. Please recommend, let other people know about both Daily Kos and our podcast. And we'll catch you next week. Thanks so much.